We live or we die by the clock. That's how long we have. Two lines. One to the airport truck, one to the Moscow truck. Nikolai, tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. 50 seconds! When that clock hits 0, you send this truck. I don't care if Lenin himself comes out of his tomb with a priority package. I absolutely positively have to get to Memphis tonight. We'll do our best.
Okay, I'll cancel Saturday.
No, don't. If I'm not here, I'm not.
Just so long as you're here New Year's Eve.
I will be here New Year's Eve, I promise. 2 more minutes. Thanks. Hey. Oh, my. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
I love you.
I love you too.
I'll be right back. Fire! Engine 1! Oh, come on!
The story starts with a plane battling a terrible storm. Our main character, Chuck, was just sitting peacefully in the bathroom when suddenly the plane's pressure dropped, causing the bathroom door to fly open. At the same time, a fire broke out in the cargo hold, leading to a massive explosion. The pilot told Chuck to sit down because they had to make an emergency landing in the sea. He handed Chuck a life raft and told him to fasten his seatbelt. The plane started dropping fast. It was now about 3,000 meters above the sea. That's when Chuck realized that the pocket his girlfriend had given him. The watch fell. The pilot told him to put on the life jacket, but he was the nurse. Because of the pocket watch, Jack unbuckled his seatbelt and, stumbling, went to pick it up. But as soon as he picked up the watch and tried to grab the jacket, the plane tilted and he couldn't even steady himself. The pilot noticed he wasn't in his seat, so he unbuckled his own safety belt. The sudden jolts badly injured the pilot. The pilot managed to gently touch down the plane on the sea surface. But the rough landing caused water to flood into the cabin. Because Chuck wasn't wearing his seatbelt, his life was saved. Then, suddenly the top part of the plane ripped open and seawater started flooding inside. Luckily, Chuck had an inflatable raft with him, but as soon as he opened it, a part of the raft got stuck inside the plane. The sinking plane began pulling Chuck down along with the raft. But Chuck's luck held up. The rope tied to the raft suddenly snapped, and the life raft pulled him out of the jaws of death. Finally, Chuck made it safely to the surface of the sea. He gave it his all trying to climb onto the raft. He held on tight to the edge of the raft until his last breath. But slowly, he started drifting toward the engine that was still running. Seeing danger behind him, he shut his eyes immediately. Just then, the engine caught fire, and the explosion threw him back into the sea. The whole plane sank slowly into the ocean with a loud blast. But the danger wasn't over yet. Chaku had to face not just the fierce storm at sea, but also giant waves rising one after another. He just kept holding onto the life raft's rope tightly. And somehow, he kept going. A long time passed, and suddenly the air in the life raft went out. The sharp rocks had torn it apart. That meant he had finally reached the shore. Summoning his last bit of strength, he dragged the life raft to the edge. The next morning, when the sunlight hit his face, he realized he was alive and had drifted onto a small island. But even after escaping death, he didn't feel any relief because he had no idea what dangers awaited him in this unknown place. As he walked, he started picking up the scattered stuff from the plane. He started looking for people like himself on the island. But when he looked around, all he found was an endless silence. It was clear he was stuck on an island that didn't even exist on the world map. Is anyone here? To avoid dying stranded, he began thinking up all kinds of ways to save himself. But for now, writing a help sign on the beach was the only thing he could do. Soon, night fell, and he was still hoping that some passing boat would spot him. But as the night went on, his hopes slowly turned into fear because of the eerie silence all around. He kept trembling with fear every time he heard the sounds of the really dangerous animals in the jungle. The next day, he made a makeshift resting spot from the things he had collected and started checking the stuff that had come out of the plane. Now, Besides a pocket watch his girlfriend had given him, he didn't have anything useful left. Thinking about the moments he had spent with his girlfriend, he regretted coming on this plane trip even more. Actually, before Kelly left for her business trip, she had told Chuck he gave her a pocket watch so that as soon as Christmas came, they could get married. But a sudden plane crash put a stop to those plans. Even when everyone in his family believed Chuck had died in the accident, he stubbornly kept fighting to stay alive. But on this deserted island, finding food and water became a huge challenge, and no one knew how long Chuck could hold on. He gathered many parcels from his company back together, but decided not to open them because, to him, that was a matter of work integrity. No matter that he was on a mysterious island. He might be stuck on the island, but he still didn't want to break the trust of the people counting on him. The "help" signs he had made on the beach yesterday were already washed away by the waves, so he had to use some scrap wood to write "help" again. Slowly, his will to survive was growing stronger. He knew that if he wanted to get out of there, he had to stay alive no matter what. But on this deserted little island, besides some tough coconuts, there was nothing edible. And since he didn't have any tools to open the coconuts, cracking them open was a huge challenge for him. The tough job was done. Then he finally cracked open the coconut with a sharp stone and tasted its water, which felt like nectar to him at that moment. But he wasn't satisfied with just the coconut. Chuck decided to explore other parts of this small island to fill his stomach. He wanted to climb the highest peak here to see everything, but the sharp rocky hills made his path difficult. So, he cut a piece from his pants with a stone, stuffed it with leaves, and made a pair of shoes. But when he reached the top of the mountain, that's when he realized it was truly a deserted island. There was nothing but the vast ocean all around. But apart from him, there wasn't a single soul in sight. Feeling hopeless, he was wondering how on earth he could save his own life. Then, out of nowhere, something strange caught his attention in the distance. Without thinking twice, he ran towards it. He thought it was another pilot who had survived, just like him. But when Chuck turned the pilot over, he found out that the guy had been dead for quite some time. Feeling sad, he dragged the pilot's body onto the island and found something useful nearby. He started gathering things. He kept a pair of shoes that were still wearable, a flashlight that still worked, and a worn-out wallet. Then he dug a grave for the pilot, buried the body, and carved the date of death on a rock. In the evening, Chuck sat on the beach, staring at his shoes. A strange sadness filled him. He felt that maybe next time, the one lying in that grave would be him. Because of that, Chuck couldn't sleep that night. He realized that if he just sat around doing nothing, he was as good as dead. He was determined. So, the next day, he learned how to survive in the jungle. He collected dew from the leaves into a coconut shell because he needed clean water to drink. He sharpened a wooden stick to make a spear for catching fish. Even though it all seemed a bit foolish, his constant efforts kept him from giving up. That very night, while he was using the toilet, he saw a light. He shouted loudly to get the attention of the boat. He felt like he wouldn't have to stay there any longer. He signaled with his torch, hoping someone would see him. But because the distance was too far, that faint light was of no use. As the light slowly disappeared from his sight, his heart filled with anger and helplessness. So, the next morning, as soon as the sun rose, he eagerly grabbed the torn raft and headed toward the ship, because after weeks of trying, this was his only chance to escape. He wasn't about to lose it just like that. Although he wanted to cross the sea somehow, he kept getting knocked down by the waves. He showed courage countless times, but every time the waves pushed him back. But still, he wasn't ready to give up. He tried hard, but eventually the sea swallowed him whole. As soon as he went underwater, his thigh hit a sharp sea rock, and a sharp pain made his thigh bleed badly. By then, he didn't have any strength left to move forward. He just dragged the broken raft and barely made it back to shore in bad shape. In the evening, suddenly a strong storm and heavy rain started, making things even worse for the already injured Chuck. Using the raft, he managed to cover only the company's stuff. Then, trying to escape the rain with his leg still bleeding, he started looking for another spot. That's when he found a small cave, and, just to stay conscious, took a few sips of dirty rainwater. Almost completely exhausted, his injured body couldn't take it anymore, and he passed out on the ground. The flashlight he'd left behind died, plunging him into darkness. The next day, he woke up with sharp pain again. His leg wound was showing signs of maggots. In this lonely place, if he didn't get treated, he'd be facing even bigger trouble. To hold on to even a tiny bit of hope to stay alive, he had to let go of his stubbornness and decided to open those parcels. Inside, he found a dozen videotapes, a volleyball wrapped up like a gift, a long dress belonging to a beautiful woman, and the coolest-looking pair of skates. But he chose not to open the last parcel. Maybe because he didn't want to get disappointed, or maybe because he wanted to save a little hope for himself. He kept the parcel. He used the foam from the packing as a bandage on his wound. Then, he untied his shoelaces and made a makeshift bandage out of them. The blades from his shoes became his most useful tools, and with the black netting from a long dress, he crafted a simple fishing net. Thanks to his fishing gear, after several days, he finally managed to eat a full meal for the first time. To make swallowing raw food easier, Chuck decided to start a fire by rubbing wood together. But even though he kept trying nonstop from morning till evening and then from evening till the next morning, in his mind, it was just a tiny spark, but it never caught fire like she had hoped. When his hands got rubbed raw and started bleeding, that's when Chuck really lost it. The tough life on the island and old wounds had completely broken him. Sitting by the shore, Chuck cleaned his cuts with water, the sharp pain reminding him how bad things really were. Now, staying alive was a question he couldn't run away from. The volleyball he'd just angrily thrown lay near his feet, its bright red palm print standing out clearly. He was sitting there when a strange thought popped into his head. Using his saliva, he drew 2 eyes and a slight smile on the palm print on the volleyball. Now, the volleyball looked like a human face. Maybe because he was so lonely, he decided to make this face his friend. He named the volleyball Wilson and kept it close so it could keep him company in his life. The scene was a bit weird, sure, but at least he didn't feel so alone. With Wilson watching over him, Chucky seemed to regain all his strength. As he quickly swung the bat, he kept rubbing, and sparks finally flew out from between the pieces of wood. Seeing the fire burning, Chuck was super happy, like he had just won a huge battle. That fire wasn't just a good way to cook his food, it was also a clever way to signal that he was still around. That night, while eating, he talked to Wilson about his situation. According to his calculations, he was now more than 4,000 miles away. In other words, if he wanted someone to find him, the chances were almost impossible, but Chuck had no other option now. He just kept pushing himself to stay strong and keep living. Eating raw food and the dirt messed up his teeth, making them swollen and infected. Finally, the unbearable pain made him decide to pull the tooth out himself. He held a skate blade against the tooth in one hand and grabbed a stone in the other. He thought it was better to face one sharp pain than this long-lasting ache. Then he struck hard. Even though he was an expert at surviving in the wild, the sparkle was gone from his eyes. In just 4 years, Chuck had become a wild man. Though he was great at fishing and never lacked meat, the fire to live like before was fading from his eyes. There was no way out anymore. He didn't hold on to any hope of getting away, and each day he stayed alive was just another day of loneliness. But after a while, he found a piece of tin near the edge of the cliff and brought it down to the beach. Then, just as the sea breeze blew the tin piece away, a sudden idea struck his mind. If he could use this to cut through the waves, maybe, just maybe, he'd have a real chance to get off this place. As soon as the idea hit him, he didn't wait a second longer. On this deserted island, he had to get out as soon as possible. Chuck immediately sprang into action. First, he needed to make a boat. He gathered a bunch of twigs and piled them up. Then he used some wild vines to tie everything together. He even turned some old useless videotape into rope. By now, Chuck was starting to lose it. He felt like Wilson was watching him and didn't want to let him go. Because of that, he ended up fighting with Wilson that night. "I'll never talk to you again in my life. Heard of your worthless volleyball?" Then, in anger, he grabbed his 4-year-old. He kicked his friend away, but after a while, when he calmed down, he felt deep regret for his friend Wilson. So, in the dead of night, he went out to find Wilson and lovingly brought color back to his face. Days passed like this, and Chuck's wooden boat was finally ready. He had packed everything he needed to leave. Now, he just had to wait for a favorable wind to set his boat out to sea. He even left signs to show he was stranded there. He had been trapped on this merciless island for over 10,500 days. He had set a world record for holding on. Just as he was carving the last letter, suddenly the wind started blowing in the direction Chuck wanted. Excited, he pushed the boat toward the sea and set off to find life with his old friend Wilson. The sea waves were just as rough as before, but they couldn't stop him from getting back home. Like the waves of a lake, every wave of the sea nearly drowned him, but he kept cutting through the waves with his efforts. Every time he escaped death, the joy of breaking free inside him grew even stronger. Cast. When Chuck looked back at that tiny island that had held him captive for 4 years, a strange feeling stirred in his heart. If he hadn't stubbornly faced that hardship, he might still be living a lonely life. But his battle was just beginning. He had no idea the dangers waiting ahead would turn out to be his deadliest challenge. Just when he thought he'd drift all the way to a human settlement, another fierce storm shook him to his core. That night, the storm raged fiercely. It was impossible to keep his eyes open in the rain. He clung to the boat, helplessly tossed by the waves, enduring the attacks. It was the toughest night for him. He was powerless and had left everything to God. The good thing was that Chuck was lucky. Even the fierce storm that night couldn't take him away, but his boat was badly damaged, and the worst part was that his old friend had drifted away from the boat because the rope had loosened. By the time he realized it, Wilson had been carried far away by the sea waves. He was his only companion. He used to share his deepest thoughts with it. Even though it was just a volleyball, it was his only support. Forgetting everything, he jumped into the sea and tried to save it. But the distance was too far, and the deep sea kept frightening him again and again. On one side was the boat that could save him, and on the other was his 4-year-old companion, Wilson. But now, he had no other choice. He just watched his old friend drift away before his eyes. Wilson, forgive me. That's how he lost his only friend, and once again, loneliness and helplessness completely overwhelmed him. He was completely surrounded. Looking at the almost completely broken wooden boat and the vast ocean all around, Chuck suddenly realized that he would never make it back home. The spark of hope that had just ignited inside him was completely crushed. Finally, he threw down the oar and decided to just wait quietly for the sea to swallow him up. Just as Chuck was preparing to face death, a city sound echoed, a sound he had only ever heard in his dreams. He was about to give up hope, but mustering his last bit of strength, he turned around and saw a huge cargo ship floating right in front of him. At that moment, everyone on the ship spotted Chuck too, and after years of hardship, Chuck finally got back on a plane and headed home. His story of surviving against all odds made him famous all over town. But Chuck didn't care about any of that. All he wanted was to see his girlfriend, whom he hadn't seen in 4 years. So when a man, not his girlfriend, opened the door, he was shocked. Chuck said sharply, "I'm Kelly's husband." Jerry loved it. Then he found out that the person he had been missing was now married and had a child. Kelly's husband was calming Chuck down and defending his wife. "Maybe you should give her a little more time," he said before walking away. Seeing Kelly cry, Chuck realized how she felt. He understood it wasn't her fault. He probably would have done the same. That night, the company threw a seafood feast to welcome everyone. Delicious fish and big crabs were laid out on the table. Seeing that, Chuck felt something strange at that moment. His mind was filled with memories of that island because the crabs and fish that seemed boring on the island had turned into delicious food here. The next day, Chuck delivered the parcel he hadn't opened on the island and even gave a thank you letter. He expressed his gratitude, saying that this very package had saved his life. He never opened that strange parcel to find out what was inside, even though it had been his companion for so long, and that's how this amazing story ended. So now tell me, how did you like this video? If you liked it, make sure to check out more videos on my channel and drop a comment telling me which movie explanation you want to see next.